this thing on? Because it's getting ready to be on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bell Ringer. My name is Greg. Your guest name today, Amherst Town Supervisor Brian Kulpa, and the town's Director of Strategic Planning, Maggie Hamilton Winship. Today we're talking about opportunity zones, and specifically the opportunity zone in the town of Amherst, which is around the Boulevard Mall. Really hot button issue locally and great information straight from the town, straight from the source. So hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening. Rate us on iTunes and share with your friends. Thanks. So Supervisor Kulpa, you have a background as a planner. How do you think that has prepared you for your current role and the conversation we're about to have about opportunity zones?
So as an architect and planner, you're constantly focused on development, redevelopment, creating positive development, creating spaces that people want to interact. Thus, you tend to look at a lot of municipalities across the U.S. and Europe and start to get ideas and start to bring some of those ideas back. And I think as we head into this redevelopment of the Boulevard Mall and our opportunity zone, it's been easier for me to start to be able to generate some ideas of here's what we're looking to do, and here's I think ultimately where we're looking to go.
Right. And like I said, we're talking about opportunity zones. Maggie, for those that don't know, kind of a high-level view, what are they, and what do they mean for developers and different opportunities?
Yeah, so the designation opportunity zone is a federal program that was designed through the new tax law, and the concept was kind of anchored by this idea of investing in need-based communities, trying to draw dollars into communities that would need investment. In the town's case, we have one very large census tract 92, that was designated by the governor of New York State back in 2017 as a federal opportunity zone. And it's a census tract that has seen decline in the last decade. Certainly has low income statistics, as do all the other eligible census tracts that were along that corridor. The objective the town sought in lobbying for this specific census tract is we felt it had the most opportunity for commercial reinvestment, redevelopment. It's a dated shopping corridor located between two universities. So we really thought that by working with New York State and our partners locally, we could see some redevelopment in this census tract.
When Maggie first presented it to me, obviously the first item on the discussion list was we have a 60-acre mall site in receivership. The opportunity designation may help us, leverage a sale or a transaction and get this thing going. And to her credit, that happened. She was able to use that new opportunity zone designation to stir the pot nationally to get the property listed. Ultimately, the developer who won that auction is not using opportunity funding, but the other developers who were bidding certainly were. And so, that strategy paid off in Amherst. The opportunity zone has already worked even without anybody making an opportunity zone investment.
Absolutely.
Right. You mentioned opportunity zones as just a bigger idea are for need-based communities or neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. I think you started to touch on it, but I think when people think of Amherst, that's not maybe the first thing that comes to mind. So a little bit of the process behind, how you got this census tract into the Opportunity Zone program and,
sure.
Why it makes sense.
Yeah, so if you actually look at the census tracts that were eligible in our region, of course, there were numerous eligible census tracts, but in the town, basically the entire west side of the town of Amherst was an eligible census tract in its own right, not one of those, adjacent census tracts that had eligibility. They've all seen some decline in the last decade that, whether it's previous administrations not wanting to talk about it or just in general people's, last 50 years of Amherst's growth, they have this conception of Amherst being, very wealthy community, which of course we're a very large community. So we have, 128,000 people now, give or take.
It's the fourth largest municipality upstate. It's bigger than the city of Albany. It's the largest town upstate. It's 54 square miles, so you spread that 128,000 population out over 54 square miles. It runs the same gamut as a city. We're essentially the size of the city of Syracuse. So you have your thresholds of poverty and wealth, and different communities have different environments for that, and we certainly are no different.
And, the west side of the town is the oldest side of the town. It's adjacent to the town of Tonawanda and the city of Buffalo. And just like any other first-ring suburb anywhere in the country, we're starting to see the past, 10 years or so, some of that decline along those borders. And this was a strategy really to address that.
Right. I know the Boulevard Mall is probably the biggest reason why you wanted this included. What are some others on the list that you thought were important to make this area?
Properties-wise, the Ridgely campus, built it's a corner like Ridgely and where North Bailey kind of dies into Ridgely. It's behind the Best Buy. There's a set of annex buildings back there. That's some 50, 60 acres of site. It was the old UB temporary annex, built as temporary buildings in the 50s and 60s that are still with us. That's been purchased now outright by Benderson Development, and we're working with them to see that redeveloped. If you think about it, at close to 60 acres there, 60 acres on the Boulevard Mall site, you're talking about 120 acres of new mixed-use development. That is a catalyst not only for Amherst, but for the whole region. And the question about location, it sits mid-distance between South and North Campus. The bottom line, if we're going to talk about people coming into this area, we're going to talk about students coming into the area to go to school, this is where they're landing. So we want to give them environments between the two campuses where they say, this is appealing to us. And spending 4 years here wasn't torture. We liked it, so we're going to stay here, right? Because one of our big focuses with this opportunity zone is using it as a cornerstone for workforce retention in the town of Amherst.
Right. We just launched our Be in Buffalo Town Attraction initiative, one of the main pillars being retaining our local graduating talent. And one of the things as we kind of dive into the task force and talk to people in, the academic world is that you need to get students off campus and seeing what it's like, not just within their dorm, and that's what makes them want to stay.
And Maggie and I both subscribe to a lot of ideas about workforce retention. We're aware that regionally we only retain 25% of our foreign students. That's behind Kansas City, Missouri. It's got us outpaced by double digits. And the reason for that, I think some of the reason for that is that we don't have inclusive mixed-use environments where those students are going. It's great to have a downtown Buffalo, no question. We want to see downtown flourish. But the bottom line is if you're coming to UB and you're going to be on North Campus and South Campus, you're likely to land in Amherst. So if you're coming from Hong Kong or Mumbai, or if you're coming from Tokyo, or if you're coming from Seoul, the shock value of landing in the sea of dead big box retail, it's got to be overwhelming. So as a town, we recognize where we are in terms of where we fit in terms of the regional dynamic. We understand what we've always been, which is an economic hub centered around the North Campus. And our job as a town is to make sure that this region gets everything it needs to out of those campus locations.
Right.
And I think that being said, to the supervisor's credit, this was not a simple, hey, let's go grab this designation, right? The town has undertaken 2 years and $500,000 worth of planning to fix our zoning to allow for mixed use. We've done a generic environmental impact statement, which for the entire opportunity zone, which will take a whole layer of approvals off of any developer's plate that comes in. They can just do a short form instead of an entire GEIS. So really, as a municipal partner here, we're trying to quote unquote get out of the way of the market, right? So we want to make sites as development ready as possible to further incentivize investment.
And we've done that at the bequest and with partnership of the private sector. And we've heard, what could stymie the private sector here? Well, doing downstream sewer analysis and traffic studies, are a long, drawn-out process. If the town can do that up front, which we have done over the past year, then makes the development, that much more ready. So with our zoning in place now, and with our environmental done, seeker done, now we feel like, hey, this big box stuff is as close to shovel ready as redevelopment could ever be.
Right. You started to touch on the importance or anchor of colleges and universities in Amherst, but we consider that a strength regionally. As at Invest, we try and attract new companies here. For local businesses that are here and us attracting, what do you think it means to have that large ecosystem of universities? And I think we graduate like 25 or 28,000 kids annually. So how can that incentivize companies to want to locate here?
Well, I'll start, right? It starts with workforce development, workforce placement. So it's not just a university, obviously. University is wonderful, North Campus, South Campus, we've talked about. But having, the medical campus and all the biomedical research that happens in the town of Amherst, related to what's happening downtown, those types of industries are where people are starting to say, hey, this is what I want. This is, a future talent level coming in. So providing opportunities for people to say, hey, I can go to school there and I can see immediate placement and advancement. But then working with some of the smaller colleges, the Damons of the world, which is also seated in Amherst, and acknowledging that between the public sector and private sector schools, we have an array of student training that touches on just about every professional practice you could imagine, and every white collar and blue collar practice that one could imagine. We have all that capacity here. To me, that helps draw business, or should help draw business. Student-wise, I think you can look at some of the great things that groups like CalSpan, Dent Neurologic, Roswell, Kaleida, Buffalo Medical, some of the big firms that we know about here, see some of the advancements that they're making, and that as a student, you've got to say, look, I haven't technology as a background, as one of these Generation Z members, I'm looking for early placement, early advancement, and if I see that that whole lineup and that slew of selections ahead of me in Western New York, that's a great place to start off. If I start there, maybe I'll end there. Right.
Yeah, we say that to have a cluster of companies, there's a career ladder. There's not just a step or two, there's not a step stool of opportunities for people.
And earlier in the conversation, the supervisor mentioned our international student population, and I think a 2020 initiative for us, the town of Amherst, is going to be how do we work with the business community and organizations like Invest or Leadership Buffalo to develop a pathway for those international students to be able to seek out and be employed at these organizations, because of course there is that barrier to entry, and I think that the students want to stay and the companies need employees, so we just need to work on filling that void, and that's where as a municipality we can come to the table.
The last thing I'll add to that is that the younger millennials and the Generation Z People are so entrepreneurial that there is certainly an interest, at least in the town of Amherst, and I'm sure across Western New York, in being able to bolster startups, being able to take some of the stuff that people are doing at the collegiate level, the university level, and help them turn that into something on the ground. And when you look at projects like 43 North and those things, that's got to be inspiring to people working on on their doctorate or in their master's thesis. And hopefully we can do more together, with our partner organizations to really play that up.
Right. It's a good transition. Next month, 43 North will be going into Seneca One Tower, which is owned by Douglas Jamal, who also owns the Boulevard Mall. How has the success and turnaround of the tower, how does that encourage you for the future of the mall?
Douglas doesn't think of the two as isolated projects. He talks about them as bookends. And he talks about having the creative class of people who are inhabiting the tower either for work or for living, also work and live and recreate out at the Boulevard Mall. And that's encouraging because people haven't always drawn connections from things. And I think they see that project as, hey, this is our foot in the ground between two of the university campuses, and this tower is our foot in the ground over by the downtown campus. And now we've got some synergy because we have a foothold in the region, and that it kind of goes past the sort of traditional municipal barriers that frankly we entrench too much in sometimes here. Mm-hmm. But just knowing that he's thinking about startup, he's thinking about technology, he's thinking about next wave of business practice and what you should be looking for in the development community to stabilize given an erratic at best retail environment, means that we have a developer in the region who sees kind of what's happening nationally, best practice, and bringing that model here.
Yep.
We've been blessed. I mean, Jamal is one of a couple of national developers that we have in the area, but we also have some local development, groups in the area who have, been able to project out and now are kind of bringing some of those ideas back too. So I think what you're seeing is a wave of change from isolated single-use environments to a more nuanced trend in mixed use and diverse building operations, diverse facilities, which become hubs for creativity, and that's what is most gratifying about it.
Right. Yeah, a lot of national and local development companies either got their start in Amherst or currently, developers currently live in Amherst, and just the excitement level of being able to bring that innovation that the supervisor was talking about in real estate home to Amherst is really what we're trying to achieve working with them.
Yeah. And a lot of them, it took investing in ourselves and believing in ourselves for people from outside of Buffalo to come here and make that same commitment. So I think there's a pretty direct tie. Also a possible direct physical tie between the tower and the mall. Amherst is the possible NFTA expansion. I believe that's within the Opportunity Zone, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right through the Opportunity Zone, all the way up to North Campus,
right
into our Audubon district. That connection, transit's key, right? And every municipality who's inspiring sort of that kind of future outlook, those businesses, those groups to come in who have an eye on the future and are really the trend in the future, they're investing in transit. My hope is that it doesn't take us all the way till light rail finally gets in the ground to do transit. We need better transit options, better transit services in that corridor now. That's something I've talked to Douglas about. We can accomplish some of this just by looking into different models while we get light rail ready. But,
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, yeah, I mean, think about that corridor. The strength of a corridor that runs from Audubon and Amherst down to Main Street in Buffalo, and all of the stuff that happens along that corridor, all of the magic, all of the redevelopment. I mean, the entire complexion of light rail extension in the past was marred by this sort of weird connection down Millersport, the most direct connection between two campuses, south to north. At the end of the day, it didn't actually create any opportunity, it just moved people. Now, coming down the Boulevard in Maple, now, I think now you can see, oh, yeah, that is a catalyst for change. There are businesses who are going to want to locate in that corridor, both here, the southern end, and there, the northern end, that are going to say, I want to be here because of the connection to Buffalo, or I want to be here because of the connection to Amherst, and look at this situation. So, the NFTA got it right when they agreed to kind of make the Boulevard and Maple the preferred option.
Yeah, and embracing the density of that corridor all the way from, North Campus downtown. It's probably the densest population-wise corridor we have in Western New York, and we already know that that's one of the markers that high-growth firms are looking for, so it's really important to be able to build off of that success we do have in our region.
Right. Anything else on the Opportunity Zone before we move on a little bit more generally?
Just, obviously we're excited about it. We're excited about the work we've put in. We can't wait to continue to show it off a little bit. If there's listeners that say, hey, we want to know more about Amherst and the Opportunity Zone specifically, now's the time, because we're just coming off this GIS. We have our seeker ready, and it's a great time to try to make an investment in that area. So we're open and looking for partners.
Right, and I just wanted to end on more generally the economic development ecosystem. We recently had a win in Amherst, Cubic Transportation Systems. I was at the ribbon cutting where heard you speak.
Yeah.
Can you just, Maggie, maybe talk a little bit more generally about, it
Sure.
doesn't even have to be that project, but just collaboration in economic development, how it can help?
Absolutely, and working together as a team, worked a lot with Lori Abinator from Invest on that project, and I actually think that's a really interesting and unique project because the kind of back office space that they required to set up and expand and grow in Western New York, it exists in Amherst, and that's kind of one of the benefits that we have is that B office space that where people aren't going to afford high-rise rents with no parking for that sort of setup. So the best case scenario is to strategically, town-wide identify some of those spaces that, maybe they still need some level of investment, like we might be lacking some amenities in that sort of office park. Definitely still need to address some zoning changes to accommodate those amenities. But the whole idea is Amherst is participating in economic development with Erie County, with the city of Buffalo. We're here as a regional partner, and everybody has strengths that they can embrace. And I think for that Cubic collaboration, we really showed, Amherst is here as a team player. Let's get this done for the benefit of the state, really.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming in today. Before I let you go, a couple hard-hitting blizzard round questions.
Uh-oh.
We'll go Maggie and then Supervisor Kulpa. If you were a flavor of ice cream, what would you be?
Ooh, green tea.
Okay. Peanut butter cup. Like Harry's.
Book or TV show that you'd recommend?
Anything by Neil Gaiman.
I actually rewatch and watch over and over again The War, the PBS special by Ken Burns.
Okay. Ken Burns baseball. I'm a big fan of that.
Oh, yeah. That's go on for a whole another podcast there.
Text or phone call?
Phone call.
Text.
Bills or Sabres?
Bills.
Hiking or skiing?
Hiking.
Skiing.
Last question. Chicken wings, drumstick or flat?
Flat.
Flat. Definitely.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Glad I got that right.
Bell Ringer is a podcast by Invest Buffalo Niagara, the region's privately funded, nonprofit marketing and economic development organization. Please rate this podcast, follow our social media channels, and read our blog at buffaloniagara.org for the best of Buffalo Niagara. Come grow your business with us.